The next thing I'm going to need you to do is open .babelrc. If you remember, we're using import everywhere, the ES6 module system in Node. We're going to have to translate that so Node knows how to understand it, because Node still does not know how to do ES6 modules, right? So we're going to have to give it another env here, and it's actually going to be exactly the same as test. That's not always going to be the case. It's probably often going to be the case. But we're going to make another one called server. And it's going to have plugins. And it's going to have the same transform ES 2015 modules common.js. Again, you could make these the same env. There are different concerns, right? What goes into test is not necessarily going to be what goes into the server, but so I recommend against doing that, despite the fact of it being impossible. Okay. So from here, I want you to create a new file. It's going to be called server.js. It's going to be outside of the JS directory, because everything in the JS directory is our React app. This is going to be in the top level. This is going to be our Node server. And this is just going to be a lot of code all at once, because you need all of it for it to work. So just bear with me. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say, I'm going to use some console logging in here, and that's OK. So no console 0. This is turning off the no console warning for this particular file. First thing we're going to do up here is require babel-register. There's a couple ways you can do this. I'm using Babel register, which means everything in this file itself will not be transpiled. So I can't use like JSX or anything that Node doesn't understand here. But everything that it requires will be run through Babel. So when I require my app, it can use JSX, it can use ES, like future ES stuff, like all that's fine. And that's what Babel register does for you. It's kind of hooking into that require and running it all through Babel. There's another thing called Babel node that will actually compile the file that's being run as well, and you're welcome to use that. It's kind of up to you. So let's just require a bunch of stuff now. So const express equals require express. Const react equals require react. Const react DOM server equals require react-dom/server. Const react router equals require react-router-dom. Const lodash equals require lodash. Const fs equals require fs. And const app equals require ./js/app. And something you're going to have to do here, if you recall, we're using ES6 modules. So when that gets translated to being a required common.js module, remember we export default, right? So you're going to have to say .default. That's just what you have to do there. Because this is going to return to you an object with one key in it, and the one key in it is going to be default. Hence, you have to pull the default part off of it. OK. From here, we're going to pull out const static router equals react router dot static router. This static router is going to be what we're going to use to replace browser router. This works in Node. OK. Const port, you can put this on whatever port suits you. I'm going to put it on 8080. Const base template, this is going to be our index.html file, is going to be equal to fs.read file sync ./index.html. So just so you are aware, this is definitely not a Node course, but read file sync is going to read this file from the file system, and it's going to pause until it is finished reading. This is typically a horrible idea. However, on startup, it's okay, right? Because this is going to be read once. If you're doing read file sync in every request, you're going to have a bad time, for sure. So just be aware. Typically, you would do here is read file, right? And then you would provide it a callback, like once it was finished reading it. But here we can do sync since this is going to be done once on startup, and that's totally fine. Const template equals lodash.template with base template. What template is going to be now is a function that when we invoke it, we pass in body, and we're going to get back our markup inside of the index.html file. So this is a function. Okay, that should be enough kind of setup for ourselves. Now we're going to say const server equals express. Again, you can do this with any different Node server. We could use Restify, we could use Happy, we could use Koa. I'm just using Express because it's very simple and it suits our needs for today. And the first thing we're going to do here is say server.use/public express.static./public. This is just saying statically serve everything that's in the public directory. So that's like our CSS, that'll be our bundle.js, that'll be all that stuff, all the images. It'll also put all the, the correct MIME types and all that kind of stuff for us, because that's really annoying to write yourself. Okay, and then after that, we're going to say server.use recres. This is where we're going to be doing our templating and all that kind of stuff. Let's pull this up so you can see it. So the first thing we're going to want to do is create a context object. This is something that's going to be passed to React Router. We're going to say const body equals React DOM server dot render to string. So you know how we use React DOM.render and then we tell it where to put it in the DOM, right? This is replacing that. Instead of rendering out to a DOM or something like that, it's just going to give you back a string of the HTML. Okay? Then here, remember we're not in JSX land, so we can't use JSX here. So we're going to fall back to that first set of skills that I taught you, the very first thing, of using React.createElement. So this should all look familiar to you. So React.createElement. And the first most outermost layer is going to be the static router. And we're going to pass to the static router the location, which is going to be rec.url, right? That's what the user requested from the website. And we're going to pass to it the context object. But if you remember context:context, we can shorten that down to just context. But that's what that is, context:context. And then inside of that, we're going to have react.createElement app. And we don't need to give anything to app. That's just fine, right? So that's going to be the static router on the outside and app on the inside, and that's all that's going to be. Okay? So now we're going to get this string, which is going to be here on body, right? So the reason why we passed in this context object to React Router is sometimes you're going to get redirected, right? Our app will never redirect because we never wrote any redirects, right? But if that happens, I wanted to show you how that you would handle that. Oops. So you're going to say if context.url. So this is going to say, React Router is going to modify this context object that you pass into it. And if there's a redirect in here, you can say res.redirect And you can put the status on here if you want to, like 301 or 302, depending on what you're doing. I'm just going to leave it off for now. Context.url, I think it defaults to 301 if I remember correctly. So that's how you do that. If there is a redirect, this will send them off to wherever they need to go. Otherwise, res.write template body : body, but again, we can just put body. And then you're going to say res.end. So this is server-side rendering with React Router. What's amazing about this is we don't have to duplicate our logic anymore, right? We get to write one set of route definitions in the client, and it's automatically sent to Node as well. So you have one source of truth. Okay, down here at the bottom, we're going to say console.log listening on port to let we can see into the console that we're up and going, and then we're going to say server.listen on port. If you want to, you can say up here console.log. Something I like to do is rec.url so I can see requests coming in and where they're going. And typically you would have some sort of like server logging framework like Morgan or something like that. There's plenty of great Node stuff on Front End Masters, so if that's interesting to you, go down that path.